Afternoon. All right. Today I'm gonna do my video a little bit earlier because tonight we are going for dinner with my parents, and otherwise it's gonna be hard, and I don't wanna skip a day. And I wanna speak about my favorite topic, the down, today. And maybe some of you are curious about what I mean. Maybe some of you have a sense. The down is kind of like something that I have worked a lot with in my life. I think everybody who has strong emotion knows maybe, or has a sense of what I'm going to speak about. My son, he's upset. Probably needs to pee, or there we go. All right. Hey Veronica. So the down. I wanna before I start, I wanna make a little distinction, and that's I'm also gonna speak a little bit about different aspects of the down. I think some people have an idea that that the down is depression, or what it actually is, and I think there's sometimes an idea that that's like being a victim, or that it means something is broken or needs to be fixed. And I actually want to put some attention on the differences that I have observed in my life working with this topic, and particularly around there is always a story that we have that I think is still also part. Like there's some people that are like, oh, like you are stuck in your story or something like that. And I think that's actually, the story is sometimes important to observe in order to actually be able to sink down into the feeling realm and then down into the presence realm, where the down can be really experienced and worked with. This is also something I said yesterday, like, hi, that I'm setting up a group at the moment where the main focus is working with the down. Not working necessarily just with the story or with depression, but with the feelings that are in the down. And the last days were, so the down is like something that comes can come in waves, and some people give this a name. For example, one of the names is a bardo. The Buddhists call it a bardo. It's a state really where, when I describe my own experience, it's a state where I think my mind opens in a certain way. Like I have gone through a chain of experiences and my brain opens suddenly up, and I see a lot of different aspects. Like like usually it's like a contemplative state. Like I see the world. Like at the moment, for example, for me, what's coming up is like I see my mind is like expanded in the down and reflects on the topic of shall I move forward? So shall I like penetrate, or shall I relax? And then there's like a lot of like ways of observing the world around oneself, and like seeing different aspects that used to be, maybe like I had an idea like this was true for me, like I'm the assertive person, like I'm working on something, like my business, for example, and I like have a particular strategy, and suddenly I get to a point where I'm like questioning that, and then I look out in the world and I see that part, and I see the counter player, and I see them, and they suddenly I'm not sure whether who of the two is true, right? So like we pick sides and we play in life, we kind of like play often a certain part, a certain role, and it's a research, actually. That's what my experience is. We're always researching in our lives, and a bardo is when a certain role that I have been playing in order to learn something, to learn a lesson, comes to an end, and then I am being immersed in uncertainty. I'm immersed in I don't have a role, and then observation can happen. Yeah. And also then I look at the world sometimes and I'm like seeing all the different roles still playing, my old role, and also roles that are kind of like counter acting that role. So for example, one of them is like around finances, for example. Like one is like I need to go out and like actively work, and another one is like I need to feel and invite it in. That can be two roles, and suddenly you see both in the world happening and both functioning and both being present. But before there was an idea that this direction is the right one for oneself. So bardo, or the down, can be an experience of an old identity fading out. It might be that the identity still comes back at some point, or you step again into and have to learn more inside it, but it's the down is when the game is starting to come to an end, or at least the round we are playing. And here I have last time, a few videos ago or a few days ago, I made a video about a tree. Right? I've actually drawn this tree, and I talked about victim consciousness, and about seeing like our reactions are the leaves of a tree, but they are kind of like just the outer layer, and we often get to see the leaves, the fears that we have. And when we are in one of those bardo states, or when we are in the down, we often get to see just our fears suddenly pop up. And as I just said, it's like the down, or the bardo state, is a state of some game has come to an end in our life. Maybe a job has come to an end, or a certain role that I've been playing has come to an end. And there's also other people involved in our lives. And so one way how we try to avoid the down or avoid the bardo is by blaming others, by saying, oh, this game has come to an end because of you. And it can also be that maybe something we perceive as, oh, this has happened to me. Maybe someone has died, like a friend, but it's just an era coming to an end, and that brings us into the down, which is a very contemplative state, because part of us goes away as well. And so sometimes it can also be, for someone who's very sensitive, the down comes a lot, comes very often, very frequent. Someone who's very sensitive may actually experience a small down already after a friend was over for a visit, and then the person leaves. That can already cause a small down. Or maybe even just you watch a movie, and at the end of the movie, you feel like you've been such a part of you, that you have been so like identified with the movie that you maybe cry at the moment. That's also like a small down. That's a small bardo, like part of your part of what you've identified with suddenly just comes to an end. And that's not necessarily anything bad. Like, this identification is, in my opinion, something that makes us very passionate, very engaged. I think particularly, I think it's actually a more rare thing for men to be this emotional. I see that all more often with women. Like, a lot more women cry in movies than men, right? But there's something very caring about giving yourself the permission to identify with something, even if a lot of people, like even in the spiritual realm, people say like, oh, don't identify with things, or like, don't be attached. But it's I think there's a lot of courage in that, because there's also a lot of care in that. If you are with someone and you allow yourself to really love and care and feel that person, then when they leave, you have a certain identification, and then you have to reinvent yourself after they have left. Right? That's a part of empathy. It's my experience that in that state, we are uncomfortable with that identification and with the down itself, that we over the years find methods to bypass. But it's a healthy thing, the going down and letting go of what I have been identified with. It's a really healthy thing to do, because then you are clear, you are open to do something new. It cleanses you of codependency. It cleanses you from hi Anais. It cleanses you from being actually being attached. Like, going down means you fully experience something that you have just went through in your life, and you let grief, the grief that comes naturally through change, rise through you, and you close an experience off by doing that. And sometimes I think that when people have really powerful methods to avoid going down, that it seems like that's really a great thing, to have a method to avoid grief. And I think we live in a world where we really celebrate those people that have found methods to not feel sad, that like keep us with the happy and excitement. But it actually has a payback. Like, every time you don't let that down come through, and every time you don't let the grief come out, it has a payback. Like, you do pay in a certain way, and it does accumulate after a while, and it leads to feeling numb, which makes sense, because when you don't go down, you stay attached to the thing that has already left. And if you do that constantly, it builds up a kind of preference and a kind of like a constant striving to have those things back. Yeah, so let's say you had a great paycheck last month and this month you do not have a great paycheck. Then you experience a down. And accepting that down and letting yourself be inside that down is actually the thing that's needed in order for finding something, like in order to be able to experience things again. Because otherwise we live in the past. We live in hoping that this paycheck will come back again exactly in the same way it has been before. Yeah, and it will come back in a certain way, but not if we try to do it in exactly the same way it has happened before. That's the memory trying to reproduce itself. So I think this is really the thing that I'm experiencing in the down. And when we are there, when we are actually seeing the methods we use to avoid going there, we can let go and we can actually sink into it. And there's a state when we are sinking into that, when the story has stopped, the story of oh, this is unfair, or this is bad that this happens to me, or it's this person's fault, or I need to meditate or practice something very intensely in order to get back into state. When we actually let go, there is for me there's always a sense of everything is equal, sometimes to a really threatening degree, because when I see that everything is equal and see that every rational logic kind of way of looking at things doesn't really make actually any sense. Like, it doesn't really matter whether you are whether you think this way or whether you think that way. Like, you suddenly see that like it all is just a mind construct that tries to understand what reality is, but everything is just a trying. It's not really reality. And then you sit inside it, and it can be really confusing. The world can seem really confusing and hopeless. It can feel really hopeless because we live in a world where we should have an aim, where we should know what we're gonna do, where we should have a goal. But when you are in the down, there is no goal. There's no thing that actually feels desirable. But what you can feel is your is still the attachments to coming back, and you will come back. But the attachments that you can feel, like there's more stories coming out of that place. Like, I should be active, I should be doing something, I should be blah blah blah. And that's actually all the conditioning of this world still reverberating on you, trying to trying to still put yourself back together. And again, noticing that allows one to really sink down into the down even deeper. And that's something that I'm working on with people, and having a conversation partner in that place can be really rich. Having someone who witnesses you, that's what I love about my relationship with Sasha, my wife, is that we're both very skilled in being with each other inside that place, and we allow each other to just go down anytime, as often as we want, and there's no demand on the other person to be a certain way. I think there's really like that creates the richest relationship for me that I can imagine, because it really, there's so much compassion and acceptance for each other in that place. And what I'm learning these days with her is communicating, like learning to, because sometimes we feel a bit responsible for each other in that place, or like someone is in the down and the other person's not in the down, and then we'll feel uncomfortable. And it's easy to, when one person says, when I say, like, for example, like, oh, today, like, I just feel like none of the things that I have done before were good enough, and that story comes up right now, and maybe yesterday I've done a video, and like I know I can't reach that thing again today, and maybe I said something that also like was so vulnerable that I am like, I feel uncomfortable for having said that, and it's like there's, at the same time, there's an awareness that like I'm just voicing those stories, and sometimes need someone to just listen. And sometimes we're like, oh, you don't have to think that. I was just like, I know, but I do. And sometimes it just feels really good to show the other person really with slowness, like, hey, I just want, I know that this is just a story, it's coming through my head, but voicing it has me feel like being heard, has me feel connected in that place, and has me feel like I'm not alone here, but I can share it with you like a friend, and there's nothing that I actually need. And I think that's like something, that's a shift that we have had in our relationship that's so powerful. Like, that makes such a difference, that we can say what's happening, and also express sadness or express confusion, and be like, I know this is just like the story that's coming out while I'm sinking down into this like place, and just have a friend there, right? And and when you approach it in that way, I mean, I have worked with this for many years, and way back down the line, I would drink in order to not having to sink down there, or I would smoke in order to not having to sink down there. And what I know now, because it's so counterintuitive to let yourself just fall into the down, yeah, is actually, that's something that I have tried after many years of trying everything else. I've tried every other escape, until eventually I was like, this fucking thing keeps coming back, and then just letting yourself fall into it is the most counterintuitive thing to most people. But when you do it, eventually what happens is, it's like there's a great teacher, and he said it's like falling, and the falling sensation is so uncomfortable, because we think that when we let ourselves fall into it, we will hit the ground and it will smash us apart. But the truth is, if you let yourself fall into the down, there's no ground. And when you trust that that's okay to just fall, it creates a new state of being where suddenly everything just turns really sensitive, really slow. And there's a really amazing beauty that can be perceived in the down when you just allow it to happen and don't resist it anymore. That's really, for me, a place where I can go outside, walk in the park, and look at a tree and I'm just amazed of its beauty, or I don't know, nature in that moment when you're just free of resistance to the down is just one of the most like breathtaking things for me. Or also watching any other human being just do its dance in a way, even if it's the dance of the ego, can be so profound, because when you are anchored into this like falling into the down, you don't it's like you, and this is the tricky thing, because most of us have to face our greatest fear in order to let that happen. For me, one of the greatest fears is to not be able to provide. I think that's a really, like, that's a fear that most men have, a lot of men have, or the fear of being alone. I think ultimately is underneath all of that, or the fear of this existential boredom can be one. And in a way, in order to let yourself fall, you have to allow them to be there. You have to, because they are the air. They are the air that you're falling through. And there's of course there's a container you can build in order to make that an experience you taste, and you try to get closer to, but that only works to a certain degree. Eventually it you'll have to do it. You just have to do it, and you just have to let go ultimately by yourself, because no one else can really give you safety there, because that would be again like just a way of handing the responsibility a little bit away, and that can't quite 100% lead you to the real place of falling, because someone's holding you. And that last thing of trusting someone else to like take care of you inside the falling is actually what causes a lot of pain. It becomes more uncomfortable ultimately than really letting go all the way. So it's like what I hope when I work with people in that place is that I prepare them enough that they eventually know I can let go, and it's actually the safest thing to do for me to let go. There's a certain kind of self-esteem, self-confidence that needs to be established before that can happen, a certain kind of trust. But that trust cannot be external. It cannot even be external as in an idea, because that idea will become a method to protect yourself from that falling, from that down. But when you do, many people experience this kind of fatigue or exhaustion when they are depressed, and that exhaustion actually immediately vanishes when you let go. There is a really pure, easeful kind of energy available once the holding on stops. You will immediately know when that happens. Like there's no doubt. It for me sometimes it creates spurts of excitement suddenly sometimes, but that can also be another way how the ego is trying to like use that momentum, that energy, to like immediately grab onto something, like maybe an idea, or in meditation sometimes when people sit, they report from having creative ideas, and I really encourage people in that spot to to wait, to not grab for the first idea that comes to them, because the longer you actually fall, not the longer you fall, that's actually not that's not the right way to say this, but there's like deeper levels of that you can go into that bring a tremendous amount of healing, and it's not a healing of like something that's broken, but it's a healing of being really more okay with you as you are, and that's something very powerful. There's like real true self-esteem inside that. Imagine, like, it's not a getting rid of your fears, it's being, the confidence doesn't come from by overcoming your fears or by outgrowing it. By, like, let's say you have a financial fear, you are not outgrowing the fear by making a lot of money. That's actually running away from it. But you outgrow it by like thinking so deeply into it that the fear is not that it disillusions the fear. You suddenly like, oh, this is just a thought. That's actually what happens, and you suddenly know what your brain does, because that's where there is a distinction. I think when people say depression, they often think it's depression is the mixture of the down plus the stories and plus the brain. But the down is actually a very pure place, and the more you let yourself fall into it, the more you can identify what the brain, what the memory, what the thoughts are actually creating all the time. And they are a different aspect of oneself. It's a sad feelings out there. My son is still having a lot of feelings today. Yeah, there's the it's more that in the down, when it's really an opening happens in the down, the stories may still be somewhere and you still be able to hear them, but they don't appear as real anymore. And then the emotion that's happening underneath suddenly becomes clearly a interaction with the world around you, and a really empathetic kind of wave. There's a really great connection when the story has gone and when you are in the down, just rooted in the down. And also creativity is coming from that place. Yeah, so I feel a little distracted right now. I think I'm needed out there now. If you are still watching, this has been a long video, but it's also good because this may not be for you if you haven't made it till here, but if you have made it till here, then it might be for you. I am at the moment looking for some people that are really, really ready to work with this in that level of depth, and to find themselves in that level of depth. And I will be creating a group that is dealing, and that builds a container for the down, and that builds a preparation to work with the down inside your relationships, inside your self-esteem, like your self-confidence, inside the way you relate with other people, and the way you work with the world around you. And if you feel like, and also with like things like depression and addiction, like those are all part of that. And it's the deeper aim is to identify what conditioning is and to hear what is being said in the down, and to find your own vision inside the down and find that communication that's really that can give you real, like, your own inner authoritative direction rather than following something that's outside you. Like, I'm, for example, for years I've been struggling with like, my nature is, I'm very, like, I change a lot, like my emotions change a lot, and for a long time that was always something that has troubled me, because for 2 weeks I wanted to do this, like maybe a creative project, and then suddenly I would lose interest, and that would keep happening for years, and would drive me insane. Actually, it would drive me nuts, because I was like, eventually I got to a place where I'm like, I don't even know how other people manage to stick with something. I cannot even identify what it is that I want to do. Every time I feel passion, and then it just turns into something else. And this work is about finding something that actually builds a container for you to have, to put that together, and to find something that's actually, like, I would say, the fundament on which this all stands. And that created for me a platform from which I'm operating, a direction, even if like I'm still having, like, my awareness and my attention, like, it goes into different places, and still, like, I know what the general direction is. Yeah.
Sorry, may I come in to hang laundry, or do you want me to wait?
Wait just for a moment. All right, so yes, that's it for me today. If this speaks to you, or you have any questions, do feel free to reach out. All right, have a really wonderful day.